Everyone ready?
This is the SEC Insider Hit. Presented by your local Farm Bureau Insurance agent. Go local. Go with a home team.
Good morning. Welcome in. SEC Insider Hit this morning is brought to you by Farm Bureau Insurance. Bundle your car and home. Go local. Go with the home team. Go with your local Farm Bureau Insurance agent in any of the 82 counties in the state of Mississippi. Our guests join us on the Yuengling Lager guest line. Enjoy an ice-cold Yuengling Lager late this afternoon. And all of our guests this football season will join us on the Yuengling Lager guest line. We welcome in our friend, national college football analyst with ESPN. He does it all. You see him in studio. You see him in the booth. You see him on the sideline. And then, of course, ESPN 300 recruiting. He is Tom Luginbill on the Yuengling Lager guest line. Lugs, good morning. How are you?
Good morning, man. How are you? Happy Monday.
Happy Monday, dude. We're getting closer to football season. That's a good thing.
Yes, we are. Each and every day.
Man, I'm so excited. I know you are too. And so how did your son's recruiting trip go? Did it go well?
No, he didn't take a recruiting trip. He
Well,
was
I
just
meant
training camp.
y'all just visiting other schools and colleges.
Yeah, man. Yeah, it went really good. It was good for him, you know, to kind of get a sense of, you know, a campus layout, facilities, you know, do some unofficial visit tour type stuff, and just kind of get the lay of the land a little bit. He still has 2 years, but, you know, he went to 4 different camps, was able to get on campus, spend some time with some coaching staffs and things of that nature. And if he keeps working at it as a long snapper, he's going to have some opportunities. I think time will tell, you know, what his opportunities will be as an every down player.
That's so much fun. That's so cool.
Yes, it is.
And like you said, he's still got a lot of he's still got a lot of football to play, junior and senior year in high school. A lot of growing and developing and strength and conditioning and all that stuff. Well, I know it was a blast for you and your family. So ESPN 300. One of the things our listeners love it when you come on. We were talking about you an hour ago. We promote, obviously, throughout the show. And we had some listeners ask, why was Arch Manning bumped from the number one spot on your ESPN 300, Luke's?
So it's a great question. It's one I've answered about 700 times in the last 10 days, and I'm glad to do it again for you and your listeners. It's a little bit of a long-winded answer, and I think when you hear it, you'll understand a little bit more as to why. You know, we really took our time this past spring and summer going back over the last 2 to 3 years of information gathering on all of, not just quarterbacks, but particularly quarterbacks, all of the prospects, and whether or not they either played as a sophomore, played as a freshman, or played sparingly, not because of their skill set, but because of COVID. We went through almost a 2.5-year cycle, Bo, where there are some kids, I'll give you a prime example, Eli Holstein that committed to Alabama. He's been able to play 1 full season as a starter because of the pandemic. So he missed significant time. We had Malachi Nelson, who hasn't played quite as much because he was in the state of California. Okay, so you start to go through and you can see it's a very, very strong recruiting class at the quarterback position, but you also didn't have the normal sample sizes, whether it was on film or during camps and combines, because remember, whether it was Under Armour camps, whether it was the Elite 11, whether it was on-campus performance, those were all canceled. There were no places for those kids to go to perform. In the state of Louisiana, which is where Arch Manning is, they didn't have very many, if any, restrictions. He was able to play 3 full seasons and was also able to, at times, get on college campuses for some camps. And then all of a sudden, we kind of started gathering and putting all the information together. We just realized we had a lot more information on the guys that we didn't have before. And we kind of knew, we knew that it was debatable whether Arch was number one. I can tell you right now, I told our staff, I said, listen, if you took 5 or 6 different guys, Jackson Arnold, Dante Moore, Malachi Nelson, Jaden Rashada, just take them and throw them up against the wall. I think they're all so talented that if we would have had Dante Moore number one, and we would have had Malachi Nelson at 5, and we would have had Arch Manning at 7, I would have been fine with that. If we would have had Jackson Arnold at 8 and Arch Manning at 12, I would have been fine with that. That's how good and I think deep the quarterback class is. So we got through the camp and combine cycle, got through this latest Elite 11 cycle because we have access to all the film of all the reps that those kids are taking. And then on top of it, and I'm not knocking Arch Manning here, but he made a choice not to attend camps and combines. He made a choice not to attend the Elite 11 for whatever reason. And it's, again, you can view it however you want to. I'm of the belief, though, that I think it would have helped him to attend those camps and combines because he's already under such scrutiny, fair or unfair, that's the reality of the situation that he's in, that you end up being more scrutinized, I think, publicly when those types of events are going on and you're not involved in them. I think it would have helped him to be involved in those types of events. I think it would have taken some pressure off of him. But he didn't do that, and that's fine. But that's kind of a long-winded way to give you an answer. It's really more about information gathering and how interrupted the cycle was over the last 2.5, 3 years.
Tom Luginbill on the Yuengling Lager guest line talking Arch Manning and this 2023 class that I'm looking here at the ESPN 300 and Lugs, I mean, what he's, I think, laying out for us is, man, they love a lot of the quarterbacks in this class. And this goes to what we've been talking to Tom about, who was a Power 5 QB, I guess the last 5 years we've had on, is they're allowed to do more things. They're coached at a younger age, so we're getting, a deeper, better, more refined player. Now, why do you think they decided? Why do you think the Arch Manning camp decided not to do any of the camps and combines, Tom?
Maybe because they felt it would have the opportunity to turn into too much of a media circus and too much of a frenzy and not have the focus be about football or the event as a whole and have it just be about him. And maybe that was something they were concerned about, to where it would kind of take away from maybe what the event was supposed to be about. I think that's one of the reasons why, too, he chose to perform in some camp settings with some schools where it was a little bit more private, and it was a little bit more closed off. That would just be my opinion. Okay.
All right, so he's no longer number one, but he's still in the top tier. What?
Yeah, I mean, let me say this to you, Bo. I take issue with when people say, "Oh, well, if his last name was Johnson, his last name was Smith, he wouldn't even be ranked." That's not fair, nor is it true. It's really not. The kid is very, very talented. Is he playing against the level of competition that some other guys are? No. Has he played as good as maybe you want him to in some of their bigger games or in the playoffs? He didn't happen to do that last year, so I think there's going to be a lot of scrutiny on him for this coming fall, particularly if they're a playoff caliber team and how they perform late in the playoffs. I think a lot of people want to see if he's able to elevate the roster. We'll see. But I think it's very, very unfair to say, well, if his last name wasn't Manning, he would. I mean, obviously he's very, very talented. If that was the case, he would not have had the suitors he's had in recruiting.
Right. Okay. Tell our listeners, who is your number one player and why?
Malachi Nelson, the quarterback that has been committed to Lincoln Riley, really going back to when Lincoln was still at Oklahoma, now at USC. He's out of Los Alamitos High School. Has been unbelievably productive. We got to see him, 4 or 5 times this spring and summer in person. Just made a really, really good impression, mature. And I think when you look at the state, he actually took a visit this past weekend at Texas A&M. But when you look at the fit, you look at the fit of his skill set and the offensive system that he's going in, I think it's just a really, really nice marriage. And he reminds me, and I'm strictly talking about football here, but if you look at him on film and you go back and you watch Deshaun Watson as a junior at Gainesville High School in Georgia, that's almost exactly who he looks like.
Wow. Okay. He's arguably the best quarterback to ever play college football. Okay. So I'm talking about Deshaun. Seriously. I mean, to do what he did for Clemson?
Oh, I know it.
What? Even the year before when they didn't win it, to do what he did. I mean, it was, Herculean things that he did. Well, you just mentioned elevating people around him.
Yeah, no doubt.
Oh, my goodness. Because I think you could make a strong argument he is the best college quarterback in the history of college football with what he did. I mean, they weren't, this. They weren't a top 10 recruiter, and they won it. Luke's, that's unheard of. I mean,
yeah, well, they had started to become one, but you're right. They weren't where they are at now, and he was a huge piece of that puzzle.
Okay, so Malachi Nelson, for our listeners, is committed to Southern Cal, but made a visit to Aggieland and in Texas. Evidently, Texas A&M is just going to sign all the good players forever. It's over. But what a machine Jimbo has rolling. Okay, I want to go over this with you again. We do it every now and then, but probably not enough. Position of value. Most valuable positions on the field. Give me, according to Tom Luginbill and his team, in which you have evaluated thousands of kids, and y'all have y'all's formula, give me the top 3 or 4 most valuable positions on the football field, according to Tom Luginbill and ESPN 300.
Quarterback, offensive tackle, defensive cornerback, and edge pass rusher.
Okay.
Now, you can put them whatever order you want. I mean, I would probably tend to have it be, quarterback, then OT. And to be honest with you, I'd actually probably change that last one to defensive line, not just edge rushers, because the interior guys can be so impactful nowadays, especially the way they're built and the way they're conditioned. But if you look, when people ask me that question, when you look at the teams that are playing for the national championship, the teams that are in the college football playoff, and you look at the first round of the NFL draft, look at where the best, most dominant players are playing on those rosters. And it's almost by and large 100% of the time in those 4 positions.
Well, and you take it to this state, when one of our 2 teams has a special year, they have to have a special player on the D-line. Tom, you nailed it. Even because a special year here is different than Georgia and Bama, but when you win 9 or 10 plus here, it's a big damn deal. And Sam Williams was unbelievable off the edge for Ole Miss this past year. Jeffrey Simmons was such a disruptor. Kim Dichie, Fletcher Cox. When you go through the list of guys, even one player, because Bama and Georgia a lot of times have 4 to 6 of them, depending on what's going on. LSU. But even one player for one of our teams on the defensive line can be the difference in going to the Outback Bowl or a really special bowl like the Sugar or the Orange, which Mississippi State and Ole Miss have both played in the last few years. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, clarify your question. A little confused on what you're asking.
All right, so where I'm going with that is even one player on the defensive line for not a blue blood can make the difference in having a good year to a great year, like a Jeffrey Simmons or even a Sam Williams. He may not have been a first-round pick, but he was an unbelievable disruptor of the pocket for Kiffin and Ole Miss and DJ Durkin last year.
I don't think I think it's so glaring, especially along the defensive front, when you have those guys and when you don't. Like, it's glaring. I mean, it's glaring from a body type standpoint. It's glaring from a movement standpoint and visually how different you look up front. And that's why everybody's seeking to find those guys, and there's not enough of them. I mean, you look at Look at those dudes that Georgia was playing with last year. All right, and just how different they were than everybody else. But to me, like, it's a building block. If you you mentioned Clemson with Deshaun Watson. Well, the whole Clemson defensive line building block thing, really for the most part, started in the 2008 class with Daquan Bowers. Do you remember him?
Yes.
National recruit. Everybody and their brother recruited. In-state South Carolina guy. He ends up going to Clemson. And that kind of started to get the ball rolling. And then the next thing you know, it's these two guys and these three guys. And the next thing you know, you fast forward 10 years, and Clemson is 2 and 3 deep across the board along their front, right? And then you look at where the program's ascended to. So it's pretty glaring when you have one or don't have one.
I want to switch gears. Tom Luginbill with ESPN on the Yuengling Lager guest line. You called the LSU spring game, and there's some transition going from Orgeron to Brian Kelly. Obviously, Brian Kelly's a much better coach, but some things kind of fell apart. They got a little dysfunctional there at the end, but they're still LSU, and they may not be as good as Georgia or Bama, but they still have talent. Their win total is only 6.5. As you called their spring game, do you think Brian Kelly can throw up 7 or 8 plus wins in his first season at LSU, Tom?
With that defensive front, absolutely. Now, they got to find some answers at tight end. Kayshon Boute's got to actually get healthy and perform to the level he's expected to. I think that they've got numerous quarterbacks that they can win with. That win total to me is way too low. And I'll tell you why it's too low. Is they're going to be so much better coached. We tend to focus in the preseason to look at their returning too deep, right? And who they have versus who they lost, and what the dynamics like within their team. We don't look enough at probably the coaching staff and the process and the blueprint and laying it down and accountability. And the bottom line is Brian Kelly has won everywhere he's been, no matter where he's been.
Yes.
And I just think that we're undervaluing probably the overall talent of that roster, because I think it's better than people think it is, particularly on defense. If Miles Brennan stays healthy, I do think he'll be the starter, and if he does stay healthy, he's going to be a good starter. If he doesn't, I will be really surprised if they don't turn to Garrett Nussmeier, the kid who was the freshman last year that they redshirted. So I'm eagerly optimistic about what they could do in the SEC West, because they're talented enough to cause problems for other people.
Right.
They're just not an easy out. You're not writing a W in permanent ink before you play that game, and I think that makes a team dangerous if they got a bit of a chip on their shoulder. I think they certainly do.
They play Florida State first game of the year. Norvell's under fire, but you like LSU in that game, even though it's Brian Kelly's first game as the head coach at LSU. Yes,
well, I think they got the better overall roster. I chuckle at that game because if you would have gone back to when that game was scheduled and you looked at where LSU was in 2019 and where Florida State was in 2019, you would be fast forwarding and looking at this matchup saying, "Oh my gosh, LSU is going to be favored by 24." They're favored by 3.
Wow.
Isn't that amazing? Or it was 3 about a week ago. I don't know how much that line has moved. And I think what's interesting about that game is if you look at the way the season ended for LSU, right? Couldn't have been worse. I mean, it was just abysmal. But you look at the way the season ended for Florida State. They started playing good. They actually looked like an organized outfit. Jordan Travis actually looked like a competent player at quarterback. They weren't shooting themselves in the foot. They weren't self-destructing. They kind of went into the offseason with a little bit of momentum. I think that game's going to be a really highly competitive matchup deep into the fourth quarter.
Ooh, I hope you're right. I want good games are good for all of us. Now, you're not sold on the Florida-Utah game I hope it's competitive, selfishly, just because we want as many really good games going into the fourth quarter early as we can go. But that was another one that jumped out at me. LSU and Florida State, and Norvell's got to get it done sooner than later. But you make a good point. You felt like they were playing better. You felt like they were playing better down the stretch in November, right?
Oh, they totally were, yeah. And again, we're comparing it to the previous 5 years, where it was literally a goat rodeo marching down the town square of Tallahassee. I mean, that thing was so embarrassing at times with how their team would quit and things wouldn't go good, and the locker rooms in dismay. I mean, the thing was in bad shape, and they've really recovered in that regard. They really have.
I want to wrap it up with this. You mentioned you were around him within the last month or so. Chris Parson, quarterback out of Brentwood, ESPN 300, was in Starkville this past weekend. I told you his grandparents lived there. State, he decommitted from FSU. State feels like they're the leader. You don't ever know. But do you like him? I'm talking about his potential over the next 3 years for you.
Parson?
Chris Parson. Do you like him or really like him, Tom?
I like him. I wish he was a little bit bigger. And I think it's always easy to say that with anybody who's in the 5'11" range, because you get so conditioned to thinking that that's just not big enough, and then you start looking around how this game's evolved, and there's a bunch of 5'11" guys playing. It's not like it was 20, 25 years ago. I just think he's a really, really gifted athlete that will get miscategorized as a dual threat guy because of how athletic he is, and you'll gloss over how good of a passer he is. And so the more we see him, I think the more we see him develop, he has so much growth potential as a passer that I think it makes him a very, very dangerous player.
Okay. We'll leave it there. What's on the schedule for Tom Luginbill this week?
So I got to go to Nashville tomorrow. There's a recruiting and player personnel symposium that I'm a part of working, that our group, the UC Report, is involved in putting on. And really what it is it's a 2-day symposium of player personnel directors, player personnel coordinators, student assistants, those looking to rise in the scouting and personnel profession at the collegiate level. And it's an opportunity for everybody to get together and have roundtable discussions and panels and discuss legislation, recruiting rules, scouting practices and all of that. And then come back, let's see, that would take me to Wednesday, and then I come back. I've got Sirius XM radio on Friday. I got my son's first inter-squad scrimmage on Saturday. And then after that, I haven't seen the schedule, but I think I'm on College Football Live a few times here in the back half of the month.
I'm ready. You're ready. We're ready.
Yeah.
Here we go. Tom Luginbill. Thank you, buddy. Appreciate it.
All right. Thank you.
National college football analyst with ESPN. He joined us on the Yuengling Lager guest line. Fantastic beer. Throw some burgers on the grill this afternoon, or maybe a pork tenderloin. Pair it with a Yuengling Lager. You can find at Corner Market, grocery stores throughout the state of Mississippi. And all of our guests will join us on the Yuengling Lager guest line. We're live in the Bank Plus studio. Don't forget to hit us up on the Ag Up Equipment text line, 601-885-3776. Hour number 3 coming up.